Fraud has always been a major concern for banks, but the problem has now hit epic proportions. Hello and welcome to RiskMatters. I am Arion, and today we will talk more about this problem and its impact on the broader economy. By some estimates, frauds cost the global economy over $5 trillion per year. For reference, that is more than the size of the German economy, so the volume is staggering, and unfortunately this number is likely to rise much higher. All of us get messages on our phones at least every week telling us to enter our bank or credit card information in return for something. These scams are so elaborate and look so real that all of us at one point or another have thought that these may be genuine. It's a far cry from 20 years ago when we used to receive those poorly worded emails from Nigeria telling us that our long-lost uncle had died, leaving us millions of dollars in inheritance. Those were the days. But today I want to talk to you about two major internal frauds that took place over the last few years, which I think you will find interesting. You will see how poor governance and oversight can lead to disastrous consequences. We will start in Asia with the case of 67-year-old Trong My Lan, which became a story that shook the world. She was implicated in a $44 billion fraud in her home country of Vietnam. I repeat, $44 billion, which is close to 10% of that country's GDP. And for this scandal, she was sentenced to death. Unless, of course, she can find a way to pay the bank back $27 billion, which seems quite difficult at the moment. The legal case involved 2,700 people testifying, over 200 lawyers, and court material that was so much that it was stored in 104 boxes weighing 6 tons. The head of the ruling Communist Party in Vietnam led the so-called Blazing Furnaces campaign against corruption, and this case was the cornerstone of this campaign. The story is particularly interesting as Trong My Lan started as a street vendor, selling cosmetics and using her income to buy land after the Communist Party liberalized land ownership. By the 1990s, she had owned a large portfolio of restaurants and real estate. By 2011, she had become a powerful businesswoman and arranged for the merger of 3 small banks into Saigon Commercial Bank. And while Vietnamese law prohibits any one person from owning over 5% of a bank, Ms. Lan was able to control over 90% of the bank through an intricate web of shell companies. Managers were ordered to provide a massive amount of loans to her companies, such that 93% of the bank's total lending was to her companies. Even her driver was involved, as he was ordered to take out around $4 billion in cash and store it in a basement. Now, you may say this is a developing country that has endemic corruption. Certainly something like this couldn't happen in Europe. Well, let's go to Germany, the country that has dominated the European economy and which pressured countries like Greece to clean up their act during the financial crisis. We will start in Munich with a company called Wirecard that had been around since the dot-com period. Their goal was relatively simple: to process payments for online merchants, particularly those dealing in high-risk verticals such as adult content and online gambling. During the dot-com crisis, the company went bankrupt in 2002, and a group of investors under CEO Markus Braun recapitalized it and determined that Wirecard was not going to be just another payment service provider, but would have control over the entire payment chain. This ambition became evident in their push to acquire a banking license, which would eventually allow it to issue cards, handle deposits, and process payments without relying on third-party institutions. Just 3 years later, Wirecard merged with a publicly listed company called Infogenie Europe AG, a struggling German call center and information services business that was listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Once the merger was complete, Infogenie's operations ended, and the new entity was renamed Wirecard AG, and it became a publicly listed company. From the outset, Wirecard's auditor was Ernst & Young, EY, one of the big 4 accounting firms, and Wirecard's association with EY gave it a critical layer of credibility. To secure a banking license, Wirecard went for the easiest option and acquired a company called XCOM Bank AG, which was an unknown organization, but one that had a full German banking license. Wirecard could now offer financial services that extended beyond payment processing. It could now issue credit and debit cards, manage deposits, and operate as a principal member of the Visa and MasterCard networks. By 2006, its operating margins were over 22%, which is an incredible number for a sector which has very compressed margins, usually in the low single digits. From now on, they operated under the oversight of BaFin, Germany's respected financial regulator, and the company could claim oversight, institutional credibility, and regulatory compliance. Over the next 5 years, the company embarked on a rapid and global M&A spree, which involved payment gateways in Singapore and the Philippines, prepaid card issuers in Asia, and service hubs in Sao Paulo and Dubai. But by 2008, things looked too good to be true. A shareholder group called SDK issued a dossier accusing the company of falsifying its accounts and manipulating the reporting and custody of customer funds in a way that made its balance sheet appear healthier than it actually was. While Wirecard's stock fell at the outset, it was SDK that ended up in trouble. EY conducted a special audit that ultimately cleared Wirecard. BaFin, the regulator, pursued legal action against the authors of the dossier due to their failure to disclose the fact that they held both open short positions against Wirecard. In the end, the courts found the SDK authors guilty of having failed to disclose their short positions and convicted both authors of market manipulation. So much for the regulators encouraging people to come forward and report problems. Between 2007 and 2012, Wirecard's revenues grew rapidly, increasing from roughly 150 million to over 400 million euros, with its operations now spanning multiple continents. By 2012, it was one of the most recognized fintechs in the world, something unusual for a non-Silicon Valley company. But in 2016, a group calling itself Zatara Research and Investigations released a report that accused Wirecard of serious financial misconduct. However, the regulator took no severe action against Wirecard, whose sales surpassed 1 billion in 2017 and which entered the DAX 30, now the DAX 40, Germany's most prominent stock index. And that happened in September of 2018. But the end was coming. The Financial Times had just been given a massive story, a whistleblower who provided internal documents. In an article in January of 2019, it was alleged that Wirecard staff in the company's Singapore office had engaged in backdating contracts, forging invoices, and manipulating accounts to make it appear that transactions had occurred when they, in fact, had not. The article, written by Dan McCrum and Stefania Palma, was the first in a 3-part series and was immediately met with dismissal from the management of Wirecard. However, the market reacted swiftly. Wirecard's share price dropped nearly 40% within days of the first article being published. In March and May of that year, the FT published 2 more extensive pieces on the scandal. In fact, the May report claimed that a majority of the company's revenue came from 3 business partners in Asia, all of which appeared to be fictitious. KPMG, another Big Four accounting firm, were brought in to conduct their own audit and could not verify the existence of $1 billion in cash balances. On the 25th of June 2020, Wirecard filed for insolvency after revealing that 1.9 billion euros was quote-unquote missing, and that was followed by the termination and the arrest of its CEO, Markus Braun, and that was the end of Wirecard. As with most things in the business world, major failings come down to poor governance and poor oversight. Regulators and boards of directors are usually the ones not doing their jobs properly, and investors, business partners, consumers, and many times the taxpayers pay the price. If you like this content, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.